close your eyes, if you will, for just a moment. Feel the weight of the silence around you, the soft pillow against your cheek, the slow rhythm of your own breath. There is a peace in this darkness, a quiet that settles into the bones. Now, imagine that you are not in your bed, but somewhere deep below the surface of the earth, in another time, under a sky you cannot see. The air is thick and still, and the only sound is the distant, dripping whisper of water through ancient rock. This is the world of the Roman miner, a world of perpetual twilight, where the sun is only a memory, and the ground above seems 1,000 miles away. It is a strange thing to think of the Romans as people who dug holes in the ground. We picture them in grand forums, in marble baths, on sunlit battlefields. But beneath the feet of those senators and merchants, beneath the very cobblestones of Rome, there was another Rome, one carved out of the darkness, a city of tunnels and chambers, of sweat and strain, where men spent their entire lives far from the light of day. They were not gladiators or generals, but they performed a kind of labor that was just as demanding, just as perilous. They were the ones who pulled silver from the hills, who ripped lead from the veins of the earth, who found the gold that made the empire glitter. And yet, when we speak of them, we often forget the suffocating weight of the world above them. The heat down there was a constant companion, a heavy, damp warmth that clung to the skin like a second garment. It was not the dry heat of a desert, but a wet, underground heat, the breath of the earth itself, stale and heavy with minerals. The deeper the shaft, the hotter it became, until the air felt thick as soup, and every breath was a small act of will. The Roman miners had no pumps, no fans, no air conditioning. They had only the simplest of tricks to survive. They would sometimes build tunnels that branched off in many directions, creating a natural ventilation system, a kind of subterranean maze that allowed the stale air to drift and be replaced by cooler drafts from above. But it was never enough. There are Roman texts that speak of miners carrying heavy stones from deep pits, only to collapse at the surface, gasping for air, their faces red and swollen. They knew nothing of carbon dioxide or low oxygen, but they understood the feeling of the air turning bad, the growing heaviness in the chest, the slow creep of dizziness. They called it the evil air, and they feared it more than the cave-ins. One of the most curious ways they fought the heat and the foul air was by building fires underground. Now, this seems like a strange idea, to add more heat to a place already hot, but there was a method to it. They would build a large fire at the bottom of a deep shaft, and as the flame consumed the available oxygen, it would create a draft, pulling cooler, fresher air down from the entrance. It was a crude form of ventilation, a desperate gamble. They would stand at the top of the shaft, waiting for the fire to burn itself out, then plunge back down into the smoky, heated chamber before the bad air returned. It was a race against the invisible enemy, and sometimes the enemy won. And then there was the dust. If you can, picture the air now, not just dark, but filled with tiny, swirling particles. The dust of Roman mines was not just dirt. It was the dust of crushed rock, of lead, of silver, of copper. It was sharp and metallic, and it got into everything. It coated the miners' lungs, their skin, their eyes. They wore no masks, no protective gear. They wrapped cloths around their mouths and noses, but these quickly became clogged and wet, more of a nuisance than a help. There are accounts of miners coughing up black phlegm for days after coming to the surface, and many did not live past their 30s. Their bodies wore out from the inside. The dust was so fine that it hung in the air for hours after the work stopped, settling slowly on every surface, turning the miners into statues of pale gray stone. When they walked, it rose in small clouds around their feet. When they spoke, it caught in their throats. It was a world of perpetual grit, and there was no washing it away, not completely. Not until they were done for the day. And the darkness. Oh, the darkness. It was not like the darkness of a starry night, where your eyes eventually adjust and shapes begin to emerge. It was a total, absolute darkness, a blackness so thick you could feel it pressing against your face. The Romans used oil lamps, simple clay vessels filled with olive oil and fitted with a linen wick. These lamps gave off a small, flickering flame, nothing more than a pinprick of light in the vast underground caverns. A miner would carry one of these lamps in his hand, or sometimes wear a small lamp attached to a headband, a crude precursor to the miner's lamp. But the flame was feeble, and it cast long, dancing shadows that made the tunnels seem alive, full of movement that was not there. The smoke from the lamps added to the haze, making the air even thicker. Miners often worked by touch, feeling for seams in the rock, their fingers more reliable than their eyes. They knew the tunnels by the shape of the walls, by the echoes of their own voices, by the cool draft of an unused passage. They learned to walk without seeing, to sense the depth of a pit by the sound of a dropped stone. Now, you might imagine that life down there was one of unending misery, and in many ways it was. But the Romans, like all people who work in difficult places, found their small comforts. They would sometimes sing, their voices echoing strangely in the tunnels, a sound that must have been eerie and beautiful at the same time. They would share stories, passing the time with tales of surface life, of families, of crops, of the sun. There are even records of miners getting drunk, of course. They would bring small flasks of wine or posca, a sour, watered-down vinegar drink, to take the edge off the long hours. Sometimes they would drink too much and stumble into a pit, or fall asleep against a wall and be forgotten. It was a dangerous habit, but a very human one. The Roman writer Pliny the Elder, who was something of a natural history nerd, wrote about the practices in the mines, and he mentions that miners often kept a small dog or a goat with them in the tunnels. Not for companionship, though that no doubt helped, but as a warning system. The animals, being smaller and more sensitive to changes in air quality, would become distressed or collapse before the humans did, giving the miners a precious few minutes to scramble for the surface. There is something oddly touching about the image of a Roman miner, covered in dust, carrying a tiny goat down a rickety ladder into the dark. The goat bleeding in protest, its eyes wide and white in the lamplight. The tools they used were simple but brutal. Hammers made of iron, picks with wooden handles, wedges of hard metal that they would drive into cracks in the rock. They would strike the rock again and again, the sound a dull, rhythmic clang that would echo for hundreds of feet. The noise was constant, a grinding, thudding, chipping noise that never stopped. It is hard to imagine the sheer volume of sound in a Roman mine. The echoes would overlap, creating a pillow of noise that made it impossible to hear a shout from 5 feet away. Miners learned to communicate by touch, by signals, by a system of taps on the rock. A single tap might mean stop. A series of rapid taps might mean danger. A long, slow tap could mean help. It was a language of the dark, a Morse code of the deep earth. And they had to deal with the water. Almost every mine filled with water, sometimes slowly seeping through the cracks, sometimes gushing in a sudden flood. The Romans had no electric pumps, so they had to remove the water by hand. They would stand in chains, in long lines, passing buckets of water from one man to the next, up the shaft, over and over, hour after hour. Imagine standing in a tunnel, your feet in cold water, passing a heavy wooden bucket to the man next to you, your arms aching, your back screaming. It was called the chain gang, and it was often the punishment for slaves or criminals, though even free miners would have to take their turn. There was no other way. The water had to be removed, or the mine would drown. The water was often warm, heated by the deep earth, and it smelled of sulfur and dissolved metals. It stained the skin orange or black. It was a filthy, unending chore. But perhaps the most astonishing thing about these Roman miners was their skill. They did not just dig haphazardly. They planned their tunnels with a precision that is still impressive today. They would use the natural cracks and layers of the rock, following veins of ore with an instinct that seems almost supernatural. They built underground rooms 30 feet high, supported by pillars of rock left deliberately in place. They carved steps into the walls, spiral staircases that descended into the heart of the mountain. They knew the geology of the land, the angles of the faults, the best ways to drive a tunnel so that it would not collapse. They had no dynamite, no power tools, no machines. They had only their arms, their hammers, and their lamps. And yet they created some of the deepest and most extensive underground works of the ancient world. One mine in Spain, at a place called Rio Tinto, was worked for over 1,000 years, from before the Romans until the modern era. The Romans dug tunnels so deep that they reached far below the water table, and they had to constantly bail out the water. They built great wooden wheels, worked by slaves, to lift the water out. These wheels were like giant water mills in reverse, their paddles turning as men walked on them, like hamsters in a horrific cage. The water would splash and gurgle as it was lifted, then poured into channels that carried it away. The whole mine must have been a chaos of noise and water and darkness. Now, take a slow breath. Let your shoulders soften. We are just beginning to explore this world. The heat, the dust, the darkness, They are still around us, but we can leave them for a moment. The Roman miner did not have the luxury of leaving. He was down there for hours, sometimes for days on end. There are stories of miners being trapped by cave-ins, living for weeks on rainwater and candle wax until they were rescued or died. There are stories of men who went so deep that they forgot what the sky looked like, who emerged blinking and pale, their eyes hurt by the sun. The Romans called these men the shadow people because they moved like ghosts, their skin gray with dust, their eyes sunken and dark. But let us not rush. Let us linger in this underground place for a while longer, not with fear, but with a kind of sleepy curiosity. Soon, we will talk more about their lamps, their tools, their superstitions, and the strange ways they kept themselves alive in the belly of the earth. But for now, just rest in the knowledge that these miners were not so different from us. They loved, they laughed, they feared, they hoped. They sang in the dark, and they dreamed of the sun. And tonight, as you lie warm and safe, you can imagine their world, a world so far from your own, but not so far that it cannot drift softly into your mind, like the echo of a distant hammer, tapping a slow rhythm against the stone. Good night, for now. We will continue our descent soon. Let us descend a little further then, not with any rush, but slowly, as if we are walking down a long, winding staircase, each step echoing softly in the stone. Imagine that you are standing at the mouth of a Roman mine, a dark opening in the side of a hill. The air that comes out is warm and smells of earth and metal, like the breath of some sleeping creature. You take a lantern in your hand, a simple clay lamp with a flickering flame, and you step inside. The light immediately shrinks around you, pressing the darkness back only a few feet. The ground under your feet is uneven, worn smooth by countless footsteps. You can feel the coolness of the rock through the soles of your sandals, but as you go deeper, the rock becomes warmer, almost warm to the touch, as if the mountain itself has a fever. The miners who worked here were not all the same. Some were slaves, bought and sold, owned by the mine owner just like the hammers and the buckets. Others were convicts, sentenced to the mines as punishment for crimes, both great and small. A man caught stealing a loaf of bread might find himself chained to a rock face, swinging a hammer until his arms gave out. And then there were the free miners, men who chose this work because they could earn a little more than they could above ground, men who needed money to feed their families or pay off a debt. They were all in this darkness together, breathing the same dust, sweating the same sweat. But there was a strange kind of equality down here. No one cared if you were a slave or a free man when the tunnel collapsed. The rock crushed everyone the same. Before they began their shift, many miners would pause at the entrance and make a small offering. A pinch of salt, a splash of wine, a muttered prayer to the gods of the underworld. They would ask Pluto to spare them, or Jupiter to guide their hands. Some would touch a small carved figure, a little idol of a god they kept in a pouch around their neck. They had their own saints, you might say, though they would not have used that word. They believed that the mountain had a a kind of genius loci, and that the spirit must be respected. If they forgot to make an offering, they believed the mountain would take revenge, sending a rock fall or a pocket of bad air to choke them. So they were careful. They were very careful. Now let us walk deeper. The tunnel narrows, and you have to stoop. The walls are rough and jagged, and you can see marks where picks and hammers have bitten into the stone. The air grows thicker, harder to breathe. Your lamp flickers, and for a moment you are afraid it will go out. But it settles, and you continue. You begin to hear a sound, a rhythmical clinking, like a distant chisel. That is the sound of other miners working. They are ahead of you, perhaps 100 feet away, but the sound travels strangely in the tunnels. It seems to come from everywhere and nowhere. You walk toward it, and soon you see another light, a second lamp, and then a third. The tunnel opens into a larger chamber, a room carved out of the rock by years of labor. The ceiling is high above you, supported by pillars of stone left in place by the miners. They knew that if they took too much, the roof would fall. So they left these columns, like trees in a forest of rock. In this chamber, several men are working. One is holding a lamp high, while another swings a heavy iron pick at the wall. The pick strikes the rock with a dull thud, and chips of stone fly into the darkness. There is no conversation. The noise is too great, but they work together with a kind of silent understanding. The man with the lamp steps back as the other swings, then moves forward to inspect the crack. He points, and the pick swings again. This goes on for hours, a slow, brutal dance. The men are covered in dust. Their skin is gray, their eyes red from the smoke of the lamps. They wear simple tunics, torn and filthy. Some wear nothing but a loincloth, their bodies glistening with sweat in the lamplight. And yet, even in this harsh world, there were small moments of grace. If a miner found a particularly rich vein of ore, a thick seam of silver or gold, the overseer might allow a short break. The men would sit on the damp floor, passing a leather flask of wine. They would not talk much, but they would look at the shining metal in the rock, and they would know that this was good. This meant that the day had not been wasted. This meant that they might eat a little better tonight. The hope of striking a rich vein was what kept them going. The hope that tomorrow might be better than today. But hope alone could not save them from the dangers. The greatest enemy, besides exhaustion, was the air itself. Deep underground, the air grew stagnant. The lamps consumed oxygen and gave off smoke. The men breathed in dust, and their lungs slowly filled with it. The Roman doctors knew about something they called miner's consumption, a disease that turned men pale and weak, made them cough up black phlegm. They died young, most miners. A man who started working in the mines at 20 might be dead by 35, his lungs ruined, his bones broken, his skin scarred. But they did not think about that. They thought about the next swing of the pick, the next bucket of water, the next step forward. And there was the water. Oh, the water. It was everywhere, seeping through cracks, dripping from the ceiling, pooling on the floor. Sometimes you would hear a sudden gush, and you would know that a new spring had been broken. Then the chain gang would form. Men would stand in a line, passing buckets hand over hand, up a long ladder or a ramp, hauling the water to a higher level where it could be drained away. The water was cold and heavy, and the buckets were clumsy. You had to be careful not to let the bucket slip, or you would splash the man below you. And if you slipped yourself, if you lost your footing on the wet ladder, you would fall into the darkness, and the men below would hear a scream and a splash, and then silence. They would say a quick prayer and keep working. There was no time to mourn. Let us take a rest now. You and I, we will sit on a ledge, just for a moment. The lamp is low, and the flame is small, but it is enough. We are deep underground, surrounded by rock that has been here for millions of years. The miners have only been here for a few decades, but their marks are everywhere. The walls are scratched with names, dates, little sketches. You might see a crude drawing of a man, or an animal, or a god. Sometimes you see a message scratched into the stone. Marcus was here, or Jupiter protect us. These are the voices of the dead, still speaking to anyone who comes after. There is a special kind of silence that lives in the deep parts of a mine. It is not the silence of an empty room. It is a heavy, pressing silence, like a blanket that has been laid over you. Your ears strain for any sound, and sometimes you hear things that are not there. A whisper that might be the wind, a footstep that might be a ghost. The miners believed in spirits. They believed that the mountain was full of the souls of those who had died in the tunnels, and that these souls sometimes showed themselves as pale lights, will-o'-the-wisps that would lead a man astray. If you saw a light where no light should be, you were supposed to turn around and walk back the way you came. Do not follow it, they said. It will lead you to a pit. It will lead you to your death. And yet, they also believed in luck. They had superstitions about certain tools, certain days, certain numbers. A broken hammer was bad luck. A lamp that went out without reason was a warning. If a bird flew into the tunnel, it meant news from the surface, perhaps a death, perhaps a birth. They were a superstitious lot, these miners. But can you blame them? Living in constant darkness, surrounded by danger, you would find comfort in any small sign of order in the chaos. Now let us think about the surface world, the world these men left behind when they descended. For many, that world was not much brighter. They lived in small huts near the mine, built of stone and mud, with thatched roofs. The huts were drafty, and the smoke from the cooking fire filled the room. They ate simple food, bread, beans, olives, a little salted fish. They drank water if it was clean or pasca if it was not. They slept on the floor, on mats of straw, wrapped in their cloaks. The work was hard, but the nights were short. They would lie down, exhausted, and fall asleep almost instantly, their dreams filled with the clang of hammers and the flicker of lamps. And in the morning, they would wake in the dark, long before the sun rose. They would eat a quick meal, check their tools, and walk to the mine entrance. They would look up at the sky, if it was a clear morning, and see the stars still shining. They would take a deep breath of clean air, and then they would step into the mouth of the earth, and the day would begin again. But there was also a kind of pride in this work. The miners knew that they were doing something important. They were pulling silver and gold and copper out of the ground, and those metals would become coins and jewelry and statues. They were feeding the empire. They were making the world go round. And even if they never saw the finished product, even if they never held a coin that came from the ore they had dug, they knew that they were part of something bigger than themselves. They were the hands of Rome. So let us sit here for a little longer, in the dim light, listening to the distant sound of hammers. The air is still. The temperature is warm. Your eyelids feel heavy. You are not in danger here. You are just a visitor. And the miners, the shadow people of the ancient world, they are all around you, but they are not threatening. They are like old friends, showing you their world with a quiet patience. They are saying, see, this is how we lived. This is what we did. This is what it meant to be a man in the dark. We will rise soon and walk a little further. There is still more to see, but for now, just rest. Let the rhythm of the picks lull you. Let the soft glow of the lamp keep you company. The night is long, and the story is gentle. The overseer was a different kind of creature. He stood at the mouth of the tunnel, leaning on a staff, watching the men pass. He did not swing a pick himself. He did not carry water. He wore a cleaner tunic, and his hands were soft. But he carried a heavy key ring at his belt, and sometimes a short whip coiled at his side. He was not cruel, not always, but he was necessary. Someone had to decide where the miners would work, who would go to the water chain, who would be sent to the deepest galleries. Someone had to mark the tally of ore brought to the surface, and someone had to report to the owner, the wealthy man who lived in a villa far away, who never saw the darkness, who only counted the silver that came out. The overseer knew the miners by name. He knew which men were strong, which were sick, which were likely to cause trouble. He knew that a man named Lucius had a bad leg, so he gave him lighter work near the entrance. He knew that a young man named Gaius was too bold, too reckless, and would need watching. He knew that an old man named Decimus had been mining for 30 years, a rare age for a miner, and that his lungs were so damaged he could barely speak above a whisper. But Decimus could still read the rock. He could tell you where the vein would turn, where the quartz would open, where the silver lay hidden. So the overseer kept him on, even though he could no longer swing a pick. Decimus would sit in a corner of the tunnel, his lamp beside him, and point. And the younger men would follow his finger, and they would find the silver. There was a boy, too. His name was Felix, and he was only 12 years old. He had come to the mine because his father worked there, and his father had died last winter in a cave-in. The overseer felt a kind of pity, or perhaps just practicality. Boys could crawl into narrow spaces that men could not reach. Felix was small and thin, and he could wriggle into the cracks where the ore was richest. He carried a small lamp and a little hammer. He would go into the darkness, into a space so tight he could barely turn around, and he would tap on the rock, listening for the hollow sound that meant a pocket of silver. He was not afraid, or he had learned not to show it. He would stay in those cramped places for hours, chipping away, passing the chunks back to the waiting men. At night, he would sleep in the hut with the others, curled up near the fire. He did not cry for his father. There was no time for that. Now, let us go deeper. We have walked past the main tunnel, past the branching galleries, past the water chain that passes buckets endlessly. The air grows heavier. The lamp flame burns a little lower. We come to a chamber where the ceiling is low, and we must crouch. The walls here are wet, and the floor is slick with mud. This is where the newest vein was struck, just 3 days ago. The men are excited. They speak in low voices, but there is a hum in their words. They have uncovered a band of rock that is thick with galena, the ore that gives up its silver when smelted. The overseer has sent word to the surface. Tomorrow, a cart will be brought down to haul out the richest pieces. Tonight, the men are working late, refusing to stop. The lamp oil is running low, but they have brought extra. They will work until they can no longer see. You can hear the rhythm of the picks, a steady chink, 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 like a slow heartbeat. Sometimes a pick will hit a harder nodule, and the sound will change, a sharp clang that echoes down the tunnel. The man will curse softly, adjust his grip, and strike again. One of the miners begins to hum. It is a tune you do not recognize, perhaps a folk song from his home village, somewhere far to the north. The others join in, humming low and rough. The sound is mournful, almost like a lullaby. It fills the chamber, mixing with the smell of sweat and rock dust and wet wool. It is strange to hear music so deep underground, and yet it fits. It softens the harsh edges of the work. One of the hummers is a man named Valerius. He is in his late 20s, strong with thick shoulders and a scar across his cheek from a rock splinter. He has been mining for 8 years. He has a wife, or perhaps a woman he calls his wife, in the settlement above. They have a small child, a girl named Antonia. He has seen her maybe 10 times in the last year. The work keeps him underground for weeks at a time, sleeping in the tunnels, never seeing the sun. But he hums for her. He hums the song she hums, the one his woman taught him. It is a song about a little bird that flies away and always comes back. He thinks of Antonia when he hums. He thinks of her small hands, her dark eyes. He swings the pick again. He hums a little louder. And then there is the matter of the darkness itself. You and I, we are used to light. We can flip a switch, strike a match, open a curtain. But the miners had nothing but their lamps, and the lamps were weak. They burned olive oil, sometimes animal fat, and the flame was no bigger than a thumb. It cast a circle of light maybe 3 feet across. Beyond that, the darkness was absolute. You could hold your hand in front of your face and not see it. You could shout, and the sound would be swallowed. The darkness was a presence, a thing with weight. It pressed against you from all sides. Some men could not bear it. They would start to panic, their hearts racing, their breath coming fast. They would drop their tools and run blindly into the black. Sometimes they found a wall and stopped. Sometimes they fell into a pit and did not get up. The overseer did not punish them. He just sent them to the surface and told them not to come back. The mines had no place for men who feared the dark. But most miners, they learned to live with it. They learned to see with their hands, to feel the shape of the tunnel with their feet, to listen for the drip of water that told them where a passage led. They learned that the darkness was not an enemy, but a companion. It was always there. It never left. It was the same darkness that had been in the mountain for millions of years, before any human had ever descended. It would still be there long after they were gone. So they made peace with it. They even found a kind of comfort in it. The darkness hid them. It wrapped around them like a blanket. In the darkness, there was no judgment, no rank, no difference between a slave and a free man. All were equal in the dark. Now, I want to tell you about the oil for the lamps. It was a constant worry. If the lamp went out, you were in serious trouble. You could not relight it yourself, not without fire. And fire was not easy to carry. The miners used a special kind of lamp, a clay saucer with a spout for the wick. They carried a small flask of oil in a pouch at their belt. When the flame grew low, they would carefully refill the lamp, tilting the flask with steady hands. But if they spilled the oil, if they wasted even a drop, they would have to work in the dark for the rest of the shift, or beg a flame from a neighbor. And that was embarrassing. It showed carelessness. It showed that you were not a true miner. There was a trick to the wick. You had to trim it just right, not too long, not too short. Too long, and the flame would smoke and give off a black soot that coated your lungs. Too short, and the flame would be weak, barely more than a spark. The lamp was a living thing. It needed attention. It needed respect. And when you handled it with the same care you would give a child. The miners would sometimes name their lamps. They would scratch a little mark on the clay, a symbol of luck, a cross, or a circle. They would talk to the lamp as if it could hear. "Stay with me, little one," they would say. "Do not go out, I need you. Let us leave this chamber now and walk back toward the entrance. The way is long, but we are not in a hurry." The tunnel slopes gently upward. The air becomes a little cooler, a little fresher. You begin to smell something other than rock and sweat. It is the smell of damp earth, and perhaps a hint of wood smoke from the surface. Your legs are tired. Your back aches from stooping. But you feel a lightness, a sense of relief. You are returning to the world of light. And as you walk, you notice something on the wall. It is a carving, deep and old. It is a figure of a man, or perhaps a god, with a torch in one hand and a hammer in the other. It is rough, done with a crude tool, but there is something powerful about it. The eyes are two deep holes. The mouth is a line. The figure seems to be looking at you or through you. The miners left these carvings everywhere, little prayers to whatever gods they believed in. Some offered to Jupiter, the king of the gods. Some to Vulcan, the god of fire and metal. Some to a darker god, a god of the underworld, whose name no one spoke aloud. They would leave a small offering at the foot of the carving, a piece of bread, a coin, a drop of oil. They would whisper a prayer, and then they would go back to work. They believed that the carvings watched over them. They believed that the stone eyes could see in the dark. Now we see a light ahead. It is not the yellow glow of a lamp, but a gray, pale light, the light of the sky. The tunnel opens into a wider space, a sort of cavern where the carts are loaded. There is a wooden scaffold and a pulley system that lowers the ore to the waiting wagons. The men here are older or injured or simply less skilled. They work at the surface in the daylight, but they are still covered in dust. They have the same gray skin, the same tired eyes, but they can look up and see the clouds. They can feel the wind on their faces. They are the lucky ones, in a way. We step out of the tunnel, and the light is blinding. You squint. You raise your hand to shield your eyes. The sun is low, near the horizon, a deep orange. The air smells of pine and sage, and something metallic, the smell of crushed rock. There's a noise, the clatter of carts, the shouts of men, the braying of mules. It is a chaotic world compared to the silence of the deep. And yet, it feels good. It feels alive. We sit on a low wall built of tailings, the waste rock that has been discarded. The stones are warm from the sun. We take a deep breath. The dust in our lungs begins to settle. A boy comes by with a bucket of water, and we drink. The water is cold, and it tastes of clay. But it is wonderful. It washes away the grit. We close our eyes, and we let the warmth of the sun soak into our skin. The shift is ending. Men are emerging from the tunnel, one by one, in groups of 2 or 3. They blink in the light. They cough. They stretch their backs. Some of them sit down right where they stand, too tired to move. Others walk slowly toward the huts, their shadows long in the evening light. One of them, the man Valerius, stops and looks up at the sky. He has not seen it for days. He watches a bird, a small brown bird, winging its way south. He thinks of his daughter. He will go to the settlement tonight, if he has the strength. He will hold her. He will hum the song again. And she will sleep in his arms, safe and warm, while the mountain waits. Tomorrow he will go back down. They all will. The mountain is patient. It will wait. And the darkness will be there as it has always been, deep and quiet and old. But for now there is light. There is air. There is a moment of rest. And that is enough. And so we sit on the warm stones, watching the men emerge, one by one, from the mouth of the earth. The light is golden now, the kind of light that painters try to capture and never quite manage. It pours over everything, soft and heavy, like honey. The dust in the air catches it, and for a moment, the whole scene looks like a dream. The men themselves seem to glow, their gray skin turned to amber. They move slowly, as if they are still half in the dark, their bodies remembering the weight of the tunnel. There is a settlement not far from here, a little cluster of huts and tents, and a few stone buildings that have been patched and repatched over the years. It is not a proper town. There is no forum, no temple, no bathhouse with marble floors, but it is home. The miners live here with their families, if they have families. Some are slaves, quartered in long barracks behind a wall of sharpened stakes. Others are free men, paid a meager wage, living in cramped rooms that smell of smoke and sweat and boiled cabbage. A few are contractors, men who have saved enough to buy a share of the ore, men who take the risk and sometimes, rarely, strike it rich. They live in the better houses, with painted walls and a courtyard, but even they are covered in the same gray dust. The dust does not care about wealth or status. The settlement wakes up when the miners come home. Women come out to meet their men, carrying bowls of water and cloths to wipe the grime from their faces. Children run through the narrow alleys, kicking stones, chasing dogs. A donkey brays somewhere, a sound like a rusty hinge. Fires are lit, and the smell of cooking food drifts through the air. It is a simple meal, usually. Bread and beans, perhaps a bit of salted fish, watered wine. Sometimes, if the miners have had a good week, there might be a piece of pork, roasted on a spit. The children gather around the fire, holding out their hands for a taste, and the men laugh, and the women scold, and the night settles in. You might be wondering about the women. They are a quiet presence in this story, but they are as strong as the men in their way. They keep the household running while their husbands are underground. They fetch water from the spring, which is half an hour's walk away. They grind the grain for bread, kneeling at the quern stone with a steady rhythm, hour after hour. They patch the clothes, sew the sacks, tend the children, and when a miner does not come home, they are the ones who light a candle and wait. They do not go into the mines. It is not allowed. It is bad luck, the men say, to have a woman in the dark. But the women know the mines. They know the sound of the shift bell. They know the look on a man's face when he has seen something he should not have seen. They know the weight of silence. There is a woman named Antonia, the wife of the miner Valerius we met earlier. She is young, not yet 20, with a child on her hip and another in her belly. She stands at the door of their hut, watching the path. She has been watching since the afternoon, since the shadow of the hill grew long. Now she sees him, a shape in the dusk, walking slowly. She does not call out. She just waits. He comes to her and she hands him a cup of water. He drinks and he coughs and she takes his hand. They go inside. The child, a little girl, reaches for him and he holds her. He hums the song about the bird. The girl's eyes grow heavy. She is asleep before the sun has fully set. Now, I want to tell you about the baths. There's a bathhouse in the settlement, though it is a humble one. It is a single room with a fire pit and a large clay basin. The water is heated by throwing hot stones into it, and the steam fills the room until you can barely see. The miners go there after their shift, if they have the energy. They sit in the steam, their muscles relaxing, their lungs opening. They scrape the dust from their skin with a strigil, a curved blade of iron. The dust comes off in gray streaks, mixed with sweat and oil. They pour water over their heads, and the water runs brown. They talk, but not about the mines. They talk about the weather, about the harvest, about a horse that broke its leg. They talk about anything except the dark. But there is one thing they do not talk about, not ever. It is a story that is told only in whispers, and only when the children are asleep. It is the story of the cave that has no end. Somewhere deep in the mountain, they say, there is a passage that goes down and down, beyond the ore, beyond the water, into a place where the air is thick and still. The men who went there, so the story goes, did not come back. Not because they died, but because they could not find their way. They wandered for days, their lamps going out one by one, until they were swallowed by the silence. Some say you can still hear them if you listen at certain shafts, a faint tapping, a low moan. But the overseer forbids anyone from speaking of it. The story is bad for morale. It makes the men nervous. And a nervous miner is a dangerous miner. Let us leave the settlement now and walk back toward the mountain. The moon is rising, a thin crescent. The sky is clear, and the stars come out one by one, like lamps being lit in a vast hall. The mountain is a dark shape against the stars, a massive presence, silent and still. From a distance, you cannot tell that it is hollow, that its heart has been carved out by generations of men. It looks like any other mountain, old and patient and indifferent. The mines have been here for a long time, longer than anyone can remember. The Romans took them over from the Etruscans, or perhaps from the Greeks, or from some people whose name has been forgotten. They have been digging for centuries, and they will keep digging for centuries more. The ore is rich here, a vein of lead and silver that runs like a thick vein through the rock. The silver is what they want. It goes to the empire to make coins, to make jewelry, to make the statues of emperors that stand in every forum. The lead is a byproduct, but it is useful too for pipes and weights and the seals on wine jars. Everything is used. Nothing is wasted. But the digging has a cost. The mountain does not give up its treasure freely. Every lump of silver is paid for in sweat and blood and broken bones. The air in the deepest tunnels is foul, heavy with carbon dioxide, the product of ancient rock decaying. A man might be working, swinging his pick, and then suddenly he stops. He feels dizzy. He cannot breathe. He drops to his knees, and if his mates do not drag him out in time, he dies. They call it the heavy air. They know it is there, but they cannot predict it. It collects in low places, in pockets, like water pooling in a ditch. They test the air with a candle. If the flame goes out, they know not to enter. But the candle is not always right. Sometimes it burns brightly, and a man steps in, and the next moment he is gone. There is a machine, or something like a machine, that the Romans used to try to move the air. It is a large bellows, worked by a team of slaves, that pushes air down a leather tube into the deeper tunnels. It is crude and inefficient, but it helps. The men call it the lung. They treat it with a kind of reverence. When the lung is working, they can breathe a little easier. When it breaks, they pray. They pray to the God of the mountain, to the spirits of their ancestors, to whoever might be listening. And then they go back to work, because the shift must go on. I want to tell you about the tools. The picks are iron, with wooden handles that have been shaped by years of use. The handle fits the hand of the worker, smoothed by sweat, worn to a curve. The head is heavy, a wedge of metal that bites into the rock. They sharpen the picks at the end of every shift, using a stone wheel that is turned by a mule. The sparks fly, and the men watch in silence. The sound of the grinding is like a low growl, a sound that carries through the settlement and puts the children to sleep. They also use hammers and wedges to split the larger rocks. They use chisels to carve out the narrow veins. They use baskets, woven from willow, to carry the ore to the surface. The baskets are cheap and light, but they break easily. A miner might spend half his shift mending a basket, threading the withes back into place. It is tedious work, but necessary. Without a basket, you cannot move the ore. Without the ore, you cannot eat. And there is the water The water is a constant problem. It seeps through the cracks, drips from the ceiling, pools in the low places. In some tunnels, the water is knee-deep, and the men work standing in it. Their feet grow white and wrinkled, then raw, then infected. The overseers have tried to drain the water, digging channels and trenches, but it always comes back. They have tried using pumps, a simple screw of wood that lifts the water up, but the screws break. They have tried prayer. That does not work either. The water is a god of its own, indifferent and patient. It will win in the end. The mountain will fill with water slowly, drop by drop, long after the last miner has gone. But that is a thought for another time. For now, the night is deep and the settlement is quiet. The fires have burned down to embers. The children are asleep. The men lie on their pallets, their bodies heavy with exhaustion. They do not dream, most of them. They are too tired to dream. They close their eyes, and the darkness takes them, and for a few hours they are free. Tomorrow, the bell will ring before dawn. They will rise, still stiff, still aching. They will eat a piece of bread, drink a cup of water. They will walk back to the tunnel. They will light their lamps, and they will descend again. The mountain will be waiting, the same as always, and the work will begin. But that is tomorrow. For now, there is only the night, the stars, the soft sound of breathing. The mountain stands silent, and the miners sleep. And you too, perhaps, are feeling your eyelids grow heavy. The story is winding down, like a lamp running low on oil. Let us sit here a moment longer in the quiet before we go. The air is cool and clean. The moon has set. The darkness is complete, but it is a gentle darkness, a darkness that holds you like a cradle. And so we rest. Let us stay here in the quiet of the night and let our thoughts drift like smoke from a dying fire. The mountain is silent, but if you listen closely, you can hear the faintest whisper of water dripping somewhere deep inside. It is a sound that never stops, a constant companion to the miners, even when they are above ground. They have learned to sleep through it, to place it in the background of their minds, like the sound of wind through the pines. But there is another sound, one that comes only at certain times. It is the sound of the bell, not the bell that wakes them, but a different bell, one that hangs at the entrance to the main tunnel. This bell is smaller, higher pitched, and it rings only in an emergency. When a tunnel collapses, when a man is trapped, when the heavy air claims another life, the bell is rung. It is a sound that cuts through the night, that stops the heart, that brings every man running. The bell does not ring often, thank the gods, but when it does, the settlement holds its breath. Let me tell you about a time when the bell rang, just once, in the deep hours before dawn. It was winter. The settlement was blanketed in snow, the kind of snow that muffles all sound, that makes the world feel wrapped in wool. The miners were in their huts, huddled around small fires, trying to stay warm. The overseer was in his house, writing reports by the light of a single lamp. The night watchman was making his rounds, stamping his feet to keep the blood moving. And then the bell rang. It was not a loud ring. It was a single, clear note, like a glass breaking in a quiet room. The watchman stopped. The overseer looked up from his papers. The miners stirred in their sleep, some of them sitting up, their eyes wide in the darkness. And then they waited. There was no second ring, no frantic shouting, nothing but the silence of the snow. The overseer pulled on his cloak and walked to the tunnel entrance. The watchman met him there. They stood together, looking into the dark mouth of the mountain. The lamp at the entrance flickered, casting dancing shadows. The overseer called out, his voice echoing into the shaft. No answer. He called again. Still nothing. Finally, he turned to the watchman and said, "It was the wind." But he did not believe it, and the watchman did not believe it either. They both knew that the bell was a thing of iron and rope, and that the wind could not ring it. But they said nothing. They went back to their huts. The miners lay down again, but sleep did not come easily that night, and the bell remained silent for the rest of the winter. I want to tell you about the women of the settlement. They are often overlooked in the stories, but they are the ones who hold the place together. They cook and clean and mend. They tend to the sick and the dying. They raise the children, and they teach them the songs and the prayers. They know the names of all the plants that grow on the mountain, and they use them to make medicines for coughs and fevers and wounds. They are the ones who wash the bodies of the dead, who wrap them in linen, who whisper the final words. They are the ones who keep the memory of the mountain alive, who tell the stories of the men who came before, who remind the living that they are part of something larger than themselves. There is a woman named Livia. She is old, older than anyone in the settlement. Her hair is white, her face is lined, her hands are gnarled with arthritis. She cannot work in the mines, but she works nonetheless. She makes the bread. Every morning, before the sun rises, she is at the communal oven, mixing flour and water and salt, kneading the dough with her strong hands. She shapes the loaves, marks them with a cross, slides them into the hot ash. The smell of baking bread fills the settlement, and it is a smell that says, "Today is a new day. We are alive." The children love Livia. They gather around her while she works, asking questions, telling stories. She listens to them with a patient smile. She gives them bits of dough to shape into birds and stars. She tells them tales of the old times when the mountain was first opened, when the tunnels were narrow and the work was even harder. She speaks of a giant made of stone, who lived inside the mountain and who guarded the silver. The miners had to make offerings to him, a piece of bread, a drop of oil, a coin, or he would cause the roof to fall. The children believe it, of course, and perhaps the miners believe it too, a little. It is easier to blame a giant than to admit that the rock is unstable. There is a ritual that the miners observe, a small thing that they do before every shift. They gather at the entrance to the tunnel, and they each touch the iron spike that is driven into the rock just beside the door. They touch it with their right hand, and they whisper a word that is never spoken aloud otherwise. The word is Sylvanus, the god of the forest, the god of the wild places. The mountain is a wild place after all. It is a wilderness of stone and darkness, and the miners are trespassers. The touch of the iron spike is a way of asking permission, of acknowledging that they are guests in a realm that does not belong to them. I want to tell you about the collapse. It happened in the autumn of the 3rd year of the reign of the Emperor Claudius. The roof of a tunnel gave way, not far from the surface. There was a sound like thunder, and then a cloud of dust, and then silence. The rescue effort lasted 3 days. The wives and mothers gathered at the entrance, clutching their children, their faces blank with shock. The overseer organized the diggers, rotated the shifts, kept the water and bread coming. On the 3rd day, they found the men. They were alive, huddled in a small pocket of air, their lamps dead, their voices hoarse from calling out. They had been singing, they said, singing the songs their mothers had taught them. It was the only way to keep the fear at bay. The rescued men were brought out one by one, covered in dust, blinking in the sunlight. The wives rushed to them, weeping. The children clung to their legs. The overseer stood to the side, wiping his face with a rag. He did not smile. He knew that the mountain had been merciful, but he also knew that its mercy was not endless. He gave the order to reinforce the tunnel with timber, to install more supports. It cost money, but it was necessary. Sometimes the mountain must be bribed. Let us speak now of the timber. It is brought down from the higher slopes, where the forests are thick. The trees are cut in the winter, when the sap is low, and dragged to the settlement by oxen. The wood is used for the shoring, for the scaffolds, for the handles of tools. It is used for the fires that heat the bathhouse, for the cooking fires, for the lamps. Every piece of wood is precious. When a timber rots or breaks, it is carefully removed and replaced. Nothing is wasted. The old wood is saved for the fires, and even the ashes are used, mixed into the mortar for the walls of the huts. The miners have a special relationship with the woodcutters. They do not see each other often, but they share a bond. The woodcutters live in the forest, in small shelters made of branches and hides. They breathe the clean air, see the open sky, hear the birds. They are a different breed of men, lean and quiet, with eyes that have learned to measure distance. They bring the timber down to the settlement once a month, and they stay for a night, drinking wine, telling stories, and then they go back up the mountain. The miners envy them sometimes, but the woodcutters envy the miners too. The miners have women, children, a fixed home. The woodcutters have only the trees and the wind and the long, cold nights. There is a story that the woodcutters tell, a story about a man who went into the forest and did not come back. He was a young man, new to the work, and he wandered too far from the camp. The other woodcutters searched for him for days, calling his name, following his tracks. They found his axe at the base of a great oak, and they found his boot hanging from a branch, but they never found him. Some say he was taken by the spirits of the forest, the ones who live in the deep groves, the ones who do not like the sound of axes. Others say he simply walked off, wanting to start a new life. But the miners know the truth. They know that the forest and the mountain are the same place, a place where a man can be lost, a place where the boundaries between this world and the next grow thin. Let us return to the settlement, to the quiet that has settled over it like a blanket. The fires have died down to embers. The moon has set. The stars are bright above, cold and distant. The air is still. Somewhere a dog barks once, then falls silent. The mountain stands as it has always stood, patient and indifferent. There is a boy named Gaius who is awake. He is 10 years old, too young to work in the mines, but old enough to understand what the mines mean. He lies on his pallet, listening to his father snore. He listens to the sound of his mother breathing, the soft rustle of the straw in the mattress. He thinks about the stories he has heard, about the giant, about the endless cave, about the men who wander in the dark. He is afraid, but it is a comfortable fear, a familiar fear. He knows that when the sun rises, his father will go to the mine, and he will come back. Most days, he will come back. Gaius has a secret. He has a small piece of silver that he found near the ore sorting station. It is a tiny lump, no bigger than his thumbnail, dull and tarnished. He keeps it hidden in a leather pouch under his pallet. He takes it out sometimes when no one is looking, and he rubs it with his thumb until it shines. He imagines that it is a coin from the emperor's treasury, a coin that could buy a house in Rome, a horse, a life free from the dust and the dark. But he knows the truth. The silver is just a piece of the mountain, a fragment of the stone that has claimed his father and his grandfather and his great-grandfather. It is not a key to freedom. It is a chain, but let us not dwell on that. The night is still young, and the stars are still shining. The boy's eyes grow heavy. The sound of his father's snoring becomes like the sound of a distant waterfall, soothing and steady. He closes his eyes. He drifts. He dreams of a bird with silver feathers, flying out of the tunnel into the blue sky. And so the night passes. The mountain breathes. The miners rest. And the story, like the tunnels, goes on deeper and deeper into the darkness, into the silence, into the place where the lamps flicker and the voices fade. But that is a journey for another time. For now, there is only the hush of the sleeping settlement, the weight of the quiet, the soft embrace of the dark. Let us stay here just a little longer and let the stillness hold us. And so the night passes. The mountain breathes. The miners rest. And the story, like the tunnels, goes on deeper and deeper into the darkness, into the silence, into the place where the lamps flicker and the voices fade. But that is a journey for another time. For now, there is only the hush of the sleeping settlement, the weight of the quiet, the soft embrace of the dark. Let us stay here just a little longer and let the stillness hold us. But even the deepest stillness cannot last forever. The first sign of morning comes not with light, but with sound. A rooster, somewhere near the edge of the settlement, lifts its head and cries out. It is a sharp sound, a crack in the silence, and it is followed by another, and then another, until the whole chorus of roosters is calling across the valley. The dogs stir, a donkey brays, and then, slowly, the darkness begins to thin. The stars fade. The sky turns from black to a deep, bruised purple, and then to a pale, weary blue. In the huts, the women rise. They have been awake for a while, perhaps, lying in the dark, listening to the breathing of their children, the creak of the roof, the rustle of mice in the walls. They know the rhythm of the morning. They know when to light the fire, when to put the water on to boil, when to wake the men. They move quietly with practiced hands. They do not need a lamp. They know the layout of the hut by feel, the position of the stool, the shelf, the clay pot. They know the way the morning light will fall. First a pale gray line under the door, then a soft golden glow that spreads across the floor like water. The children stir. They rub their eyes. They whimper a little, wanting to stay in the warmth of the blankets. But the mother is firm. She pulls them up, dresses them, gives them a piece of bread. They eat in silence, or with small, sleepy voices. The father sits on the edge of the bed, pulling on his boots. He does not speak. He is already thinking of the tunnel, of the darkness that awaits him. He has a piece of bread too, and a cup of watered wine. He eats mechanically, his eyes fixed on a point somewhere in the middle distance. His hands are stained with the dust of yesterday, and they will be stained again today. The settlement wakes slowly, like a heavy animal shaking off sleep. The blacksmith is already at his forge, building the fire. The sound of his hammer rings out, a steady, rhythmic note that echoes against the hills. The oxen are led out of their pens, their hooves clattering on the stones. The women carry water from the well, balancing the jars on their heads, their hips swaying with the weight. The children are sent to gather wood or to watch the younger ones. Everyone has a task. There is no time for idleness. And then the miners begin to gather at the entrance to the main tunnel. They come in twos and threes, their faces set in the same expressionless mask. They carry their lamps, their tools, their small bags of bread. They touch the iron spike, each one, and whisper the word. Sylvanus. It is a charm, a habit, a prayer. The overseer is there, holding a clay tablet, checking the names. He is a tall man with a scar across his jaw, and he has been working in the mines since he was a boy. He knows every tunnel, every vein, every weak spot in the roof. He knows which sections need timber, which need to be left to rest. He knows the names of the men, their wives, their children. He knows which ones are sick, which ones are strong, which ones are afraid. He gives the signal, and the first group enters. They file into the tunnel, one by one, their lamps casting long shadows on the walls. The sound of their footsteps fades. The women who have gathered to watch stand in a cluster, their hands folded, their eyes following the last light until it disappears. They do not speak. They have said their goodbyes already in the hut, in the quiet of the morning. A touch on the arm, a brief kiss on the cheek, a whispered word. That is enough. Anything more would be too heavy, too much of a burden to carry into the dark. The day settles into its routine. The sun climbs higher. The heat builds. The dust rises from the ore sorting station, where the women and children break the larger rocks with hammers, picking out the pieces of silver. They wear cloths over their mouths, but the dust still gets into their lungs, into their eyes, into the creases of their skin. They work quickly, because the faster they work, the more they are paid. But they also work carefully, because a mistake means a broken finger, a lost piece of ore, a scolding from the overseer. There is a girl named Livia who works at the sorting station. She is 14 years old, and she has been doing this work since she was 7. Her hands are calloused, her nails are chipped, Her back aches at the end of the day, but she is proud of her work. She can spot a piece of silver from 10 paces, even when it is covered in dirt. She can break a rock with one precise blow, revealing the vein inside. She has a sharp eye and a steady arm. The overseer knows her name, and he gives her the best rocks to sort. She does not dream of Rome like the boy Gaius. She does not dream of escaping. She dreams of a day when she will be given a better hammer, one with a longer handle, one that will not hurt her wrist so much. She dreams of a day when the dust will settle, when the sun will be gentle, when the wind will come down from the mountain and cool her face. She dreams of small things. She knows that big dreams are dangerous. They only lead to disappointment. The afternoon is the hardest. The heat is at its peak. The air in the tunnel grows thick and heavy. The miners work in shifts, but the shift that starts at midday is the worst. The lamps burn hotter. The water in the skins turns warm. The men sweat, and the sweat mixes with the dust, and the dust cakes on their skin. They take breaks, sitting on the stone floor, leaning against the timber supports. They do not talk much. They have heard each other's stories 100 times. They sit in silence, listening to the drip of water, the creak of the timbers, the distant sound of a pick striking rock. Sometimes they hear the voices of the dead. It is a common belief among the miners. In the deepest tunnels, where the air is still and the lamps burn low, they hear whispers. They hear their names called softly from a distance. They hear laughter or crying or singing. The experienced miners know not to respond. They know that if you answer, the voice will come closer and closer until it is right behind you, and then you will feel a cold hand on your shoulder, and you will turn, and there will be nothing there. But you will carry the sound of that whisper in your ears for the rest of your life. There is a man named Marcus who has heard the voices many times. He is an old miner with gray hair and a stooped back. He has been in the tunnels for over 30 years. He has survived 3 collapses, 4 fires, and a fever that nearly killed him. He is known for his luck, but he says it is not luck. It is respect. He respects the mountain. He never curses it. He never spits on the walls. He always makes a small offering before he starts his shift, a piece of bread or a crumb of cheese placed on a ledge near the entrance. He says that the mountain remembers. The mountain is old and it has a long memory. The younger miners tease him for it, but they also follow his example. They leave their own offerings, bits of food, a drop of oil from their lamp, a small coin. They do not know if it works, but they do not want to risk it. The mountain is not a thing to be trifled with. The mountain is a god, or the home of a god, or a place where the boundary between the living and the dead is thin. Better to be safe. Better to leave a crumb than to lose a life. The afternoon wears on. The shadows lengthen. The sun begins to slide behind the western peaks. The air cools. The women at the sorting station gather their tools and their children. They wash their faces in the trough, scrub the dust from their hands. They walk home, tired and silent. The blacksmith shuts his forge. The oxen are returned to their pens. The roosters settle on their perches. The mountain glows red in the dying light, then purple, then gray. The miners emerge from the tunnel, one by one. They are covered in dust, their eyes red-rimmed, their lips cracked. They squint in the fading light. They take a long drink of water from the skins. They stand for a moment, looking up at the sky, at the first stars appearing. They do not speak. They are too tired. They just stand there, breathing the clean air, letting the wind cool their faces. The overseer does the count. 30 men went in. 30 men came out. It is a good day. He checks the marks on his tablet. He nods. He dismisses them, and they walk home, their footsteps slow and heavy. The settlement settles into the evening. The fires are lit. The smell of cooking rises. The children are bathed in basins of warm water. The men sit on stools, sipping wine, staring into the flames. They do not talk about the tunnel. They talk about small things: the price of bread, the condition of the road, a rumor that the emperor is planning a new building project, and that silver will be needed, that the mines will be expanded, that more workers will be brought in. This last rumor makes them uneasy. New workers mean new faces, new ways, new dangers. They are not sure they want the mountain to grow any larger. They are not sure they want to dig any deeper. They have heard the stories of the old tunnels, the ones that go down so far that the air turns thick and heavy, the ones where the lamps burn blue and the men get dizzy and forget where they are. They do not want to go there. They are content with the tunnels they know, the ones that are dangerous enough. But they have no say in the matter. The overseer will decide. The owners will decide. The emperor will decide. The miners are just the hands that break the rock. They do not control the direction. They follow the vein wherever it leads. And if the vein goes down, they go down. That is the nature of the work. The night deepens. The fires die down. The children are put to bed. The men and women sit together for a while, in the quiet, holding hands, saying little. They do not need words. They have been together long enough to know what the other is thinking. The fatigue is shared. The fear is shared. The hope, faint as it is shared. The boy Gaius is in bed again. He has not spoken to his father about the piece of silver. He keeps it hidden. But tonight, he takes it out, rubs it with his thumb, feels the cool weight of it in his palm. He thinks of the giant in the mountain, the one his grandmother tells of. He imagines that the giant is real, that he is sitting in a great cavern, surrounded by silver, and that he watches the miners with his stone eyes. He imagines that the giant is lonely, that he likes the sound of picks and hammers, because they remind him that he is not alone. Gaius puts the silver back in its pouch. He tucks the pouch under his pallet. He closes his eyes. He listens to his father's breathing, the steady rhythm of sleep. He listens to his mother turn over on her pallet, the rustle of the straw. He listens to the wind outside, the way it whispers around the corners of the hut. He thinks of the tunnels, the long passages, the deep chambers, the places where the lamps burn blue. He does not want to go there, but he knows that one day he will. One day he will be old enough, and he will put on the leather apron and the boots, and he will pick up the hammer and the drill, and he will follow his father into the dark. But not tonight. Tonight he is still a boy. tonight he has the silver and the dream and the comfort of the sleeping hut. Let us leave him there in the quiet of the night, with the stars wheeling overhead and the mountain standing silent. Let us leave him to his sleep, and to the slow turning of the earth, and to the promise of the morning that will come, as it always does, with its dust and its light and its endless, patient work. The night settles over the mountain like a slow breath. The stars are out now, thousands of them, scattered across the sky like bits of silver dropped by a careless god. The air is cool and clean, and the dust has settled. The settlement is quiet. The fires have burned down to embers, glowing orange and red, pulsing faintly like the heartbeat of the earth. In one of the huts, an old woman sits by the dying fire. She is the grandmother of the settlement, the one who remembers the old stories, the ones that the younger miners do not care to hear. She is called Livia, and she is nearly 90 years old. She has outlived 2 husbands and 3 sons. She has seen the mine change hands 4 times. She has watched the tunnels grow deeper and darker, and she has watched the miners grow older and quieter. She does not speak much anymore, but when she does, the others listen. Tonight, she is thinking about the mountain. She is thinking about the spirits that live in the deep places, the ones that the miners hear when the lamps burn low. She knows their names. She has learned them from her grandmother, who learned them from her grandmother, all the way back to the time when the mountain was first opened, when the first picks struck the first rock. Those spirits are not evil, she says. They are just old. They are the voices of the ancestors, the ones who came before, the ones who dug and died and were buried in the tunnels. They are lonely. They want to talk, but they do not understand that the living have to be careful. They do not understand that a voice in the dark can pull a man out of himself, can make him forget where he is, can make him walk deeper and deeper until he is lost. Livia remembers a man named Servius. He was a young miner, strong and eager. He was proud of his strength. He would boast about how much rock he could break in a day. He would laugh at the older miners who took their time, who stopped to listen, who left offerings at the entrance. He said they were superstitious fools. He said the mountain was just rock, nothing more. He said that if you hit it hard enough, it would yield. One day, Servius went into a new tunnel that had just been opened. It was a promising vein, thick and rich. The overseer was pleased. The miners were excited. Servius volunteered to go first. He took his hammer and his drill and his lamp, and he walked into the dark. He did not leave an offering. He did not say a prayer. He just went. Hours passed. The other miners heard his hammer ringing against the stone, steady and strong. Then they heard it stop. They heard a silence. Then they heard a voice. It was Servius calling out, but his voice sounded strange, hollow, like it was coming from a long way off. They called back. He did not answer. They went to look for him. They found his lamp still burning, his hammer and drill on the ground, but Servius was not there. The tunnel branched in 3 directions. They did not know which way he had gone. They searched for days. They never found him. Some say he walked into a crack in the mountain, and it closed behind him. Some say the spirits took him. Some say he just kept walking deeper and deeper, until he forgot who he was, until he became one of the voices in the dark. Livia does not know which story is true. She only knows that Servius is still there somewhere, and that sometimes, when the wind is right, you can hear his hammer tapping against the stone, still trying to break through. The fire crackles. Livia stares into the embers. She is old and she is tired, but she does not sleep well. She dreams of the tunnels. She dreams of the faces of the men she has lost. She dreams of the silver, gleaming in the dark, beautiful and cold. She knows that the silver is a temptation. It draws men in. It makes them forget their families, their homes, their own safety. It promises wealth, but it takes everything in return. She has seen it happen too many times. But she also knows that the silver is necessary. It pays for the bread. It pays for the wine. It pays for the clothes and the tools and the medicine. The silver is the blood of the settlement. Without it, the village would wither and die. So the miners go down day after day, and they bring the silver up, and they trade it, and they live. It is a bargain, a hard bargain, but a bargain nonetheless. The night wears on. The embers fade. Livia wraps her shawl tighter around her shoulders. She closes her eyes. She does not go to bed. She falls asleep in the chair, her head bowed, her hands resting in her lap. She dreams of the mountain. She dreams of a great hall deep inside, lit by 1,000 lamps, where the spirits of the ancestors sit in a circle waiting. They are not angry. They are just waiting. They are patient. They have all the time in the world. Across the settlement, in another hut, a young woman named Junia is awake. She is the wife of a miner named Lucius. He is a good man, strong and steady, but he has been coughing lately. It is the dust. The dust gets into the lungs, and it does not come out. The older miners have the cough. Some of them die from it. Junia knows this. She has seen it. She has buried her own father, who died of the dust cough when she was 12. She remembers the sound of his breathing, shallow and rattling, as he lay on his pallet, unable to rise. She remembers the way his eyes looked, hollow and far away, as if he were already gone. She listens to Lucius breathe. He is asleep, but his breathing is not smooth. There is a catch in it, a small rasp. She touches his cheek. He is warm. She prays to the gods, to any god who will listen. She prays that the dust will spare him. She prays that the mountain will be kind. She knows that the mountain is not kind. The mountain is indifferent. It does not care about prayers. But she prays anyway, because it is all she can do. She thinks about the child growing inside her. She has not told Lucius yet. She wants to wait until she is sure, until her belly swells, until there is no doubt. She is afraid. She is afraid of the birth, of the pain, of the risk. She is afraid of bringing a child into a world of dust and darkness. But she is also hopeful. She dreams of a boy, strong and healthy, with his father's hands and his mother's eyes. She dreams of him growing up, learning to read, maybe becoming a scribe or a merchant, something far from the mountain. She knows it is a big dream. She knows that big dreams are dangerous. But she allows herself this one in the quiet of the night, when no one can see her smile. The hours pass. The stars wheel slowly overhead. The mountain stands silent. The settlement sleeps. In the deepest tunnel, far below the sleeping village, there is a chamber that no living miner has seen. It is a natural cavern formed by water and time. The walls are lined with crystals, pale and shimmering. They catch the light of a single lamp, a lamp that has been burning for decades, its oil replenished by a slow trickle of mineral oil seeping from the rock. No one knows who placed it there. No one knows how it has survived. The miners do not speak of this chamber. They do not know it exists. But sometimes, when the earth shifts, they hear a sound, a low hum like 1,000 bees, and they feel a vibration in their bones. That is the chamber singing. In the chamber, the spirits gather. They are the voices that the miners hear. They are the ancestors, the ones who dug too deep, the ones who never came back. They sit in a circle around the lamp. They do not speak. They just sit and wait and watch. They are not malevolent. They are just tired. They have been waiting for a long time. They are waiting for the mountain to open, for the sky to come down, for the end of all things. They are patient. They have all the time in the world. The night deepens. The moon rises, a sliver of silver in the black sky. It casts a pale light over the settlement, over the huts, over the sorting station, over the entrance to the mine. The entrance is dark, a square of nothingness cut into the rock. It looks like a mouth, open and waiting. A stray dog approaches, sniffs the air, then turns away. It does not go in. No animal goes in. They know better. In the hut where Gaius sleeps, the boy stirs. He is dreaming. He is dreaming of the giant in the mountain. The giant is sitting in a great cavern, his stone eyes fixed on Gaius. He is holding a piece of silver in his hand. He offers it to Gaius. Gaius reaches out, but his hand is too small. He cannot grasp it. The giant smiles, a slow, ancient smile. He says, in a voice like the grinding of rock, "Come closer. I will give it to you." But Gaius cannot move. His feet are stuck. He looks down, and the floor is made of bones. He tries to scream, but no sound comes out. He wakes up. His heart is pounding. He lies still, listening to the darkness. He hears his father's breathing. He hears the wind. He hears a sound, faint and distant, like a hammer tapping against stone. Tap, tap, tap. It is steady, rhythmic. It could be the blacksmith's apprentice working late, or it could be something else. Gaius pulls the blanket over his head. He closes his eyes. He forces himself to think of the morning, of the sun, of the warmth of the fire. He counts his breaths. 1, 2, 3. Slowly, the fear fades. Slowly, he drifts back to sleep. The tap, tap, tap continues, but it is farther away now. It is deep, deep in the mountain, in the chamber where the spirits sit. It is the sound of Servius, still trying to break through. It is the sound of all the miners who have gone before, still working, still hoping, still dreaming of the day when the vein will open and the silver will pour out like water. It is a sad sound, but also a beautiful one. It is the sound of hope, stubborn and endless. The night ends as all nights end, with the first light of dawn creeping over the eastern peaks. The sky turns from black to gray to pale blue. The stars fade. The roosters crow. The dogs stir. The settlement begins to wake. Junia opens her eyes. She has not slept much. but she feels a strange lightness. She touches her belly. She smiles. She decides that today she will tell Lucius. She will tell him about the child. She will tell him that she is not afraid. She will lie, but it will be a kind lie, a lie that gives him strength. Lucius wakes. He coughs. He sits up, rubbing his eyes. He looks at Junia. She is smiling. He does not know why, but he smiles back. He feels a warmth in his chest. He does not know about the child. He does not know about the dream. He only knows that this moment, this quiet morning, is good. He reaches out and takes her hand. They sit together in the soft light, saying nothing. In the hut where Livia sleeps in her chair, she stirs. The fire is cold. She is stiff. She opens her eyes. She looks around. She does not remember falling asleep. She hears the roosters. She hears the sounds of the settlement waking. She stands slowly, her joints aching. She goes to the door and opens it. The morning air is cool and fresh. She looks at the mountain. It is gray and still, but in the early light, it seems almost golden. She nods. She gives the mountain a small nod of acknowledgement. She does not know why. It is a habit. The boy Gaius wakes. The dream is fading, but he remembers the giant, the silver, the bones. He reaches under his pallet. The pouch is still there. He pulls it out. He opens it. The piece of silver gleams. He holds it up to the light. It is real. It is solid. It is his. He puts it back. He gets up. He dresses. He goes outside. The sun is rising. The sky is clear. The settlement is coming to life. The blacksmith is already at his forge, pumping the bellows. The women are at the well, drawing water. The men are gathering at the entrance to the mine, putting on their aprons, checking their tools. The overseer is there, tablet in hand, marking the names. Another day is beginning. Gaius watches his father walk toward the mine. His father is one of the first to go in. He does not look back. He just walks, straight and steady, into the dark. Gaius watches until the shadow swallows him. He does not feel afraid. He feels proud. He feels a strange sense of belonging. This is his world, this mountain, this dust, this silver. He is part of it. The morning moves on. The sun climbs. The heat returns. The dust rises. The work continues. And so we leave them, the miners and their families, the old woman and the boy, the man and the woman with the child inside her. We leave them to their endless, patient work. We leave them to their dreams and their fears and their small acts of hope. The mountain stands. The stars will return. The night will come again. And in the deep places, the spirits will wait, and the voices will whisper, and the tap, tap, tap of a lost miner's hammer will echo through the stone. But that is for another night. For now, there is only this: the sun, the dust, the silver, and the quiet rhythm of a life lived in the shadow of the mountain. Sleep well.